You lost your job because of my dog.
I didn't lose my job because of a dog. I lost it because I remembered important things.
She handed the coffee to the man with the dog right in front of the inspector. Her boss didn't say a word. He didn't even show anger, just stayed cold and distant. Well, that's it for you here, Emily. 6 years of loyalty wiped away with just one sentence. She didn't cry. She just untied her apron with trembling hands and walked out. Not because she broke any rules, but because she stood up for a veteran and his service dog. What Emily didn't know was that someone had recorded the whole thing. And before the morning rush at the coffee shop was over, the ground started to shake. 4 military Humvees rolled into the parking lot. Stepping out was a Marine Corps colonel in full dress uniform, the very man who owed his life to veterans like the one she had protected. And right then, everything changed. Emily Carter wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads at first glance, but she was the one folks remembered most. At 35, she managed Liberty Grounds coffee shop on the edge of downtown Liberty Hill, Virginia, just a 15-minute drive from Fort Grenganger, one of the largest naval bases in the Southeast. The town itself felt like a Norman Rockwell painting with tree-lined sidewalks. American flags hung from every third porch, and the hardware store hadn't changed its paint since the Reagan era. But inside the coffee shop, things felt different, warmer, more human. Emily made sure of that. She didn't run the place like a business. She ran it like a second home, a place where someone could walk in after a long day or a long deployment and feel human again. The coffee wasn't anything fancy, no espresso martinis or fancy foam art, just hot cups and handwritten notes pinned on the bulletin board behind the counter. What made Liberty Grounds special wasn't the coffee. It was Emily. She remembered names, birthdays, deployment dates. She knew who liked their eggs runny and who hadn't touched coffee since coming back from Iraq. She created a space for silence, especially for veterans carrying more than just physical scars. And every Wednesday at 9 a.m., she hosted an event that had quietly become a town tradition, Heroes Hour. It started with just 3 folks, her father-in-law, Ben Donnelly, a retired Marine drill instructor, Ralph, a Vietnam vet who rarely spoke but never missed a week, and Louisa, a former Army nurse with a laugh that echoed like wind chimes. Over time, the circle grew. Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Veterans from every era found their way to her shop. They came not for the menu, but for the woman running the place. Emily always said the same thing before starting: "This is a place to observe, not to judge, to sit, not to perform." And they nodded, relaxing their shoulders as they sipped coffee and shared stories. Some funny, some heavy, some so painful they couldn't be put into words. But everyone in town knew the gist of her story. Her husband, Sergeant Daniel Carter, had given his life on duty 6 years ago. She never said much about her own story, but everyone in town knew the gist of it. Her husband, Sergeant Daniel Carter, had given his life on duty 6 years ago in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. His photo hung on the wall above the cash register, not in uniform, but in jeans and a sweater, holding a coffee cup outside the shop's front door. That picture was taken 2 weeks before his final deployment. He never came home. Emily never remarried, not even hinted at it. She poured her grief into the coffee shop, not to escape it, but to build something from it, something meaningful. Folks loved her for that, but more than that, they respected her. Veterans called her ma'am without a trace of sarcasm. Young folks held the door for her without being asked. Even the mayor dropped by once a month just to thank her for holding the town together better than most institutions. But for Emily, it was never about the recognition. It was about the duty, the quiet kind, no medals, but just as important. Every time she poured a cup for a nervous vet who couldn't sit in a crowded room, every time she stepped out from behind the counter to check if someone was okay after staring out the window too long, every time she let a dog curl up under a table without a word, that wasn't about following rules. It was instinct. It was love. And that Wednesday morning, everything changed, starting just like any other. The bell on the door jingled softly. The regulars came in. Coffee was brewing. The shop was filled with light chatter, laughter, and the warmth of kinship. Emily had no idea yet, but by the end of the day, that little coffee shop would be at the center of a storm reaching all the way to Washington. And it all started with one man, one dog, and a woman who wouldn't back down. It was a crisp Wednesday morning, the kind where the sunlight seems cooler than it is, and steam rises gently from every cup like little ghosts. Emily stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, greeting every familiar face with a quiet, warm nod. She had just brewed the first pot of dark roast for Heroes Hour and was setting out the stack of ceramic mugs she reserved for veterans. Then the door opened again, and Jack Turner walked in with Ranger at his side. Jack was one of the newer faces, a former Marine scout in his late 50s. He didn't talk much and never stayed long, but he kept coming. That meant something. Ranger, his lab German Shepherd mix, never strayed more than a few inches from his heels. The dog wore a bright red vest with bold white letters, "Service dog, do not pet." Emily waved to Jack. "The window table's open?" she said with a smile. He nodded, mumbled a thanks, and led Ranger to the farthest corner. Then the atmosphere shifted. The front door swung open with a bang, and a man in a navy blue jacket, pressed trousers, and a face that seemed allergic to joy stepped in. He carried a clipboard like it was a badge of honor. His name tag read, "Ethan Reynolds, State Health Inspector." "Wasn't expecting a visitor," she greeted him politely. "Can I help you find something?" "It's an inspection," he said abruptly. No warning, he moved through the space with surgical precision, tapping surfaces, checking labels, pulling open fridge doors. And then he saw the dog. He stopped mid-stride like he'd hit a wall. "That animal!" he barked, pointing at Ranger. "State health code violation. No animals allowed in food service areas." Everyone turned. Conversations halted. Emily stepped out from behind the counter, keeping her voice steady. "He's a registered service dog," she said calmly. "The ADA law allows him to be here." Prescott frowned, scanning the room like he was looking for backup. "I don't care what vest he's wearing," he snapped. "Animals carry saliva and fur. That's a food hazard. If you don't want this place shut down, get rid of it." Jack stiffened in his seat, gripping his coffee cup like it might slip away. Ranger didn't move. He just looked at Jack and waited. The room fell silent. Emily took a deep breath and said the words she knew she couldn't take back. "I won't ask a veteran to leave, and I won't ask his service dog to leave either. You're free to write your report, but do it knowing you're trying to humiliate a man who served this country in front of the very people he protected." Prescott clenched his jaw. From across the shop, someone muttered, "That's right." But it didn't matter, because standing in the doorway now was Natalie Brooks, the regional manager for Liberty Ground's parent company. She'd clearly arrived early for a routine check and caught the whole scene. Her eyes widened, her voice icy. "Emily Carter, you've directly violated health compliance policy in front of a state inspector. Gather your things. You're fired." Gasps echoed. A spoon clattered to the floor. Jack froze, stunned. Emily didn't move at first. Then she looked around the shop. She looked at Jack, at Ranger, at the small blackboard on the wall that read, "Today's Heroes Hour. Coffee free for veterans." And she just gave a faint smile. She untied her apron with shaking fingers, folded it, and set it on the counter. Then she turned to Elena, the young barista by the espresso machine, and whispered, "Make sure Jack gets another refill." She stepped out the side door into the morning sun as the shop stood silent behind her. No one followed, but someone hit record. And somewhere out there in the world of phone, social media, and invisible networks, a story was captured. A quiet act of defiance, a line drawn. A woman fired not for breaking a rule, but for refusing to break her spirit. And far away in an office filled with military photos and brass nameplates, Colonel William Harris received a call he couldn't ignore. In 35 minutes, Liberty Grounds fell silent. Customers whispered. Some left their coffee half-finished. Others sat still, glancing out the window as if the wind might carry an explanation. But Sophie, the young barista Emily had trained, stayed at her post. Her hands shook a little as she poured Jack a second cup. "I didn't know what to say," she later admitted, "but I knew if I left that station, I'd let her down." Jack sat quietly at his table. He hadn't touched his cup since Emily left. Ranger lay curled at his feet, ears twitching, as if he sensed something broken in the room. And then it began. A low rumble, at first barely audible like distant thunder rolling over the Georgia hills. Chairs vibrated. Coffee rippled. The shop's windows started to rattle. Customers stood and looked outside. From the east end of Main Street, through the morning mist and oak-shaded sidewalks, 4 military Humvees growled into view. Their lights pierced the fog like search beams. The vehicles pulled into the parking lot in a slow, deliberate line, blocking the front of the shop. Doors opened in unison, and Colonel William Harris stepped out stoic in his marine dress blues. Gold buttons, polished white gloves, ribbons, galore his expression, unreadable. Behind him, 24 Marines followed in formation, their uniforms crisp, their presence unmistakable. No one moved. Inspector Ethan Reynolds stood frozen near the pastry case, his clipboard lowered, forgotten. They stood at attention on the sidewalk outside the shop. Inside, no one moved. Inspector Ethan Reynolds stood frozen near the pastry case, his clipboard lowered, forgotten. Natalie Brooks, the regional manager, clutched her 2-toned notebook and backed away from the counter like it might burn her. The shop's bell rang once, and Colonel Gaines entered alone. His boots hit the floor with deliberate thuds, echoing like drums in the silence. He stopped in the middle of the shop, glancing at Sophie once. She swallowed, then looked at Jack, who slowly rose to his feet. Their eyes met. Jack gave a slight nod. The colonel responded with something deeper, a salute, and that's when Prescott stammered, "I didn't know he was here." The colonel didn't reply. You don't need to know someone to treat them with basic respect. He turned to Sophie. "Is Emily Carter here?" Sophie shook her head. She was fired for standing up for Mr. McMillan and Ranger. Colonel Gaines turned back, jaw set. "That woman has served the families of this base better than most agencies combined. She gave my men a place to breathe when they came home without saying a word, and she treated a decorated Marine with the respect this nation promised him and then forgot. Jack cleared his throat, speaking for the first time. She didn't ask any questions. She didn't flinch when I walked in with the dog. She just poured coffee and showed me a seat. That was the first time in a long while I felt like a human being again. A tear rolled down the cheek of a woman near the cash register. Colonel Gaines nodded, then turned to the Marines waiting outside. He stepped toward the door and with a simple gesture signaled them. They filed in, orderly, silent, and respectful. 2 Marines went behind the counter and removed the company logo from the wall, folding the vinyl like a flag. Another replaced the blackboard with a new sign they'd brought from their vehicle. On it, handwritten in bold white letters, "Welcome to Emily's place where honor is respected every day." As Natalie Brooks tried to interject, Colonel Gaines just looked at her. "You've made your decision. Now we'll make ours." Then he stepped outside, phone in hand. A moment later, Sophie's phone rang. She looked down, puzzled. "It's a direct message from Fort Liberty. They're requesting Emily report to base headquarters." Jack sighed, eyes wide. Ranger stood up. And in the shop that once offered coffee and comfort, something entirely new was unfolding. Emily sat in her truck at the edge of the driveway, keys in hand, but the engine off. She'd been there for 15 minutes. Still in her coffee shop clothes, jeans stained with grounds, her favorite blue fleece, and shoes that had seen more spills than she cared to count. Emily stared down the road, replaying the morning's events. Fired in front of customers for doing the right thing, and now the message from the base. "Colonel Gaines wants to meet me at Fort Liberty headquarters today." She didn't know what that meant. She didn't know if it was good or bad, but deep down, she felt a shift. Something bigger than her life in Mason was just beginning. Emily took a breath, started the engine, and drove down the familiar road she'd traveled hundreds of times before. Only this time, she wasn't bringing muffins or coffee carriers. This time, she was going through the gates. Fort Liberty loomed like a city of order, discipline, flag-lined avenues, and echoing calls in the background. Emily had been there as a military wife, but now walking into the main admin building, she felt like an outsider. Colonel William Harris met her at the door. He wasn't in blues anymore, just a clean khaki uniform with a presence calm enough to command a room with a glance. "Emily," he said, extending his hand, "thanks for coming." She shook it firmly but uncertainly. She still wasn't sure why she was there. "Let me show you something." He led her down a hallway lined with portraits of past commanders, training maps, and award plaques. Award plaques. They stopped in front of a door labeled Transition Initiatives and Veterans Health. They stopped in front of a door labeled Transition Initiatives and Veterans Health. Inside the room was stacked with folding chairs, whiteboards, and unused supply boxes. A few young staffers moved quietly in the corner, setting up therapy mats and donated equipment. He explained it was a pilot program. "We've been trying to roll it out for 2 years. The trouble is, it's hard to find someone who understands veterans not just on paper, but from the inside." Emily crossed her arms. "I'm not a therapist. I don't have a social work degree." "No," he said, "but you've built a place where men and women with invisible wounds come to heal. You've done more with coffee and kindness than some programs with millions in funding." She didn't answer right away. Colonel Gaines stepped closer, his voice softer. "You've created a haven without even realizing it. What you did in that coffee shop, that's leadership, That's service. Then from the back room, a voice called out, "Is that her?" A young woman in her 20s stepped out wearing long sleeves that hid burn scars along her arm and jaw. Her name tag read, Madison Blake. She walked slowly with a golden retriever puppy in training wearing a red vest. "Hi," she said shyly. "I just wanted to say I saw your video, the one with the dog and that guy. I haven't been to a coffee shop since I got home, but I think I could sit in a place you run." Emily blinked. Something shifted in her chest. Colonel Gaines smiled. "We want to offer you a position, not just a figurehead or a name on a flyer, but as the director of this center." Emily sighed. "You're serious as a heart attack. You'll run the programs, build the space, and shape the culture. You've got what works. Community, routine, respect." She looked at Tiffany, now kneeling with her dog. She thought of Jack, of Ranger, of the dozens of men and women who'd found their way to Liberty Grounds not for lattes, but for peace. And suddenly, she knew, "I'll do it," she said softly. The colonel nodded once, "Then let's get to work." That night, Emily stood alone in what would become the new hub for Fort Liberty's outreach efforts. The walls were bare, the floor still scuffed, but the air held something sacred. She reached into her pocket and pulled out an old photo. Michael, her husband, sitting outside the coffee shop in boots, smiling at her. She pinned it to the wall. No plaque, no frame, just memory and mission. News spread faster than she expected. By the end of the week, the Veterans Transition and Health Center at Fort Liberty wasn't just a military initiative. It had become a living thing. Veterans who hadn't set foot on base in years showed up. Young soldiers returned with their spouses, hesitant. Even the local paper, the Liberty Ledger, dedicated a full page, "From Coffee Shop to Cornerstone, Emily Carter is rebuilding trust one cup at a time." Emily didn't do anything flashy. She didn't bring in big speakers or consultants. She just did what she always did. She paid attention. She asked names and remembered. She hung a whiteboard near the coffee pot with, "Anyone need a ride? Anyone need someone to listen?" She let dogs curl up in the therapy corner without complaint. She kept her handwritten notebook from the coffee shop and added new pages each for a vet walking through the door. There were quiet days, tough days. Tough days, days of just silence for recharging. But something powerful was building a space where pain didn't have to be hidden and healing didn't have to be loud. Now Jack came by regularly. Ranger went straight to his favorite corner and lay down like he belonged. Madison Blake showed up every Tuesday. She wasn't ready for group talks yet, but she started sketching dogs, hands, family reunions. And Sophie, the young barista from Mason Mug, visited every Friday. She brought coffee, sure, but laughter too. And when Emily needed a second opinion on anything from decor to website wording, Sophie was the first to chime in. But not everyone was thrilled. Some officials questioned why an untrained civilian was running a federal pilot program. Auditors showed up quietly, clipboards and hand suits stiff with skepticism. They checked logs, asked probing questions, even tested the coffee maker's water filter. At the end of the evaluation, one inspector looked Emily in the eye and asked, "Do you have any qualifications to counsel veterans?" Emily didn't blink. "I don't have qualifications," she said gently, "just persistence and kindness." The inspector didn't respond, but noted it down. A week later, Emily received an official notice. The health center was under consideration for nationwide expansion. Colonel Gaines called it a victory. Emily just called it humbling. But even as the center grew, Liberty Ground still held her heart. One afternoon, she quietly returned unannounced. Sophie was behind the counter. "You must be famous now," she teased, sliding a cup over. "I'm just here for the coffee." Emily smiled. The shop had changed. Photos of veterans now covered the walls, Jack, Tiffany, and others. A new sign hung near the register Emily's corner, where no one sits alone. Later that day, Emily drove through town to speak at a local fundraiser for veterans' families. It was a modest event, mostly elders and kids with crayon posters. She spoke without notes. "I didn't set out to build a program," she said. "I just refused to throw out a man and his dog." The crowd went quiet. Then applause erupted. Loud, long, genuine, and somewhere in the back, Jack pinned his silver star to his chest and saluted her silently. Back at the center that night, Emily sat alone by the photo wall. She added another one, a photo of the conference crowd on their feet, applauding her. Next to it, she pinned the old coffee shop picture of Michael and the soldier from long ago. And below, she wrote simply, "Honor grows when kindness endures." As she turned to leave, a young vet with anxious eyes walked in. "Is this a place for people like us?" Emily smiled gently. "No, son, this is a place for people like us." And just like that, her circle wasn't just full, it was wide open. In a world moving faster every day, it's easy to overlook the quiet moments, the soft-spoken server, the trembling vet, the wag of a service dog's tail. But sometimes, those are the moments that shape us. Emily Donnelly doesn't wear a uniform. She holds no rank, but she upholds sacred dignity. And in doing so, she reminds us all that honor isn't automatic, it's protected daily. What happened in that small coffee shop in Liberty Hill, Virginia, might seem like a rare tale, but maybe it's not. How many graces have we passed by without noticing? How many veterans have we thanked with words but not actions? In this divided world, Emily's story makes us pause and ask ourselves, would we stand up like she did? Have I ever stayed silent when I should have spoken? We want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a quiet act of courage in your life, or perhaps received kindness from others? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire others to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Thank you for joining us today. If this story moved you, subscribe, and share it with those who believe in unsung heroes. On this channel, we tell stories that matter, stories that honor not just the uniform, but the humanity behind it. Because sometimes the strongest stands don't come with a salute. Wag lightly. "The base assigned me as your escort," he said with a grin. Emily laughed, half nervous, half in awe. "You've cleaned up nicely," he quipped. "You're about to address the Pentagon." The ballroom at the conference was bigger than she expected. Emily laughed, half nervous, half in awe. "You've cleaned up nicely," he quipped. "You're about to address the Pentagon." The ballroom at the conference was bigger than she expected. White tablecloths, brass podiums polished at every corner. Her name lit up on the screen behind her in elegant letters. As she stepped to the mic, her voice was smaller than the room, but the room leaned in. "I'm no general. I'm no doctor. I don't write policy. I ran a coffee shop near a military base. I served coffee. I listened. But in that space, I witnessed something sacred happen. Veterans came not for advice, but for presence. They didn't need fixing. They needed to be seen." People nodded. Some wiped tears. "One day I was fired for letting a man sit with his service dog. That was the moment everything changed. But the truth is, it wasn't about the coffee. It was about dignity. Applause filled the hall. Jack stood in the back. He didn't cheer. He didn't clap. He just nodded like a soldier finally hearing his orders clearly. That night, as the sun set behind the Potomac, Emily stepped outside alone. She needed the quiet in the open air. A man in a gray suit with white hair approached, quiet, kind eyes behind thin glasses. "You don't remember me, do you?" he asked. She studied his face. It stirred something. He pulled out a faded photo. "You're Michael and an older man in uniform outside the coffee shop long before your husband deployed for the last time. You poured me a cup on the day I was discharged for medical reasons. You didn't say a word. You just smiled. That was the first time I felt like myself again." He handed her the photo. "Now it's yours." She took it with trembling fingers, words catching in her throat. Back home in Mason, the town threw a welcome celebration. But Emily didn't go straight there. She returned to the center. It was late and quiet. A few veterans lingered near the fire pit. She walked to the photo wall, reached into her pocket, and added a shot of the conference crowd on their feet, applauding her. Beside it, she pinned the old coffee shop picture of Michael and the soldier from long ago. And below she wrote, "Honor grows when kindness endures." As she turned to leave, a young veteran with anxious eyes stepped in. "Is this a place for folks like us?" Emily smiled softly. "No, son. This is a place for folks like us." And just like that, her circle wasn't just full, it was wide open. In a world moving faster every day, it's easy to overlook the quiet moments, the soft-spoken server, the trembling vet, the wag of a service dog's tail. But sometimes, those are the moments that shape us. Emily Donnelly doesn't wear a uniform. She holds no rank, but she upholds sacred dignity. And in doing so, she reminds us all that honor isn't automatic, it's protected daily. What happened in that small coffee shop in Liberty Hill, Virginia, might seem like a rare tale, but maybe it's not. How many graces have we passed by without noticing? How many veterans have we thanked with words, but not actions? In this divided world, Emily's story makes us pause and ask ourselves, would we stand up like she did? Have I ever stayed silent when I should have spoken? We want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a quiet act of courage in your life, or perhaps received kindness from others? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire others to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Thank you for joining us today. If this story moved you, subscribe, and share it with those who believe in unsung heroes. On this channel, we tell stories that matter, stories that honor not just the uniform, but the humanity behind it. Because sometimes the strongest stands don't come with a salute.